There is no escape. Welcome to the depths. Hello, welcome back to Reading from the Depths. My name is Lecton. Thanks for spending some time with me today. So recently I made a video about reading difficult books, books that are emotionally hard to read, that, can ruin you, and why it's nice or fun or enjoyable to read difficult books. And I was thinking of making a companion video to that about how books can also be safe spaces, and how a book being a safe space doesn't mean it isn't challenging, but it can be fulfilling a different function. And as I was trying to map out that video, I kept coming up across this idea of reading for escape, right? The idea of reading as a form of escapism. And I have things to say about it. And I thought I would just put it in that video, but it kept derailing the video. So I thought I would just make a video just about that. So hopefully this will be a short one. We'll see. And the reason I wanted to make a video is because I'm not sure that I agree that reading for escapism is a great thing to do. Let me qualify that. Let me start by saying there are many different reasons that people read, right? And whatever reasons you read are great and valid. I'm not criticizing individuals, and especially because I kind of live in a harm reduction mindset where anything that you have to do to get to the next day and without causing egregious harm to yourself or to others, I think that is a great thing, right? We live in difficult times and life is hard. So whatever you have to do that isn't causing egregious harm to yourself or to others, then more power to you. With that said, I think the idea of escapism and the idea of reading as a form of escapism, it isn't damaging per se, but I do think it isn't the best way to go about reading. And I think that there are ways that you can engage in the same type of reading but get more out of it. And now I know that you may watch this video and think I'm just being pedantic, and I can appreciate that. I am in the middle of a study program where I study for 25 years an in-depth exploration of philosophy that I could probably teach you the overview of in a day. So pedantry is like, my bread and butter. So I appreciate that it may sound pedantic to some people, but I think there is something here. And the reason is, for those people who do identify as reading as a form of escapism, I'm not suggesting you change the types of books you read. I'm not changing where you read, how you read. I'm not changing anything about the actual reading. I am suggesting to change the way you think about the act of reading, and you change the way you understand the role reading plays in your life. So it's nothing about the reading itself, it's about how you think about it, right? As a Buddhist, I'm far more concerned with process than I am with results. And the reason for that is the way you think about a thing changes the way you engage with that thing, and that changes the way you experience a thing. So your mental processes have the capacity to change your experience. It doesn't always, but it has the capacity to. So as a very coarse example, let's say, I'm sure most people have had an example like a situation like this that they can relate to, that you've had to go to some sort of party or get together, whether it be a work party or a family party or something for school, or maybe you have to accompany your spouse or partner somewhere and you don't want to go and it's going to be a bad time and you aren't looking forward to it, and yet you have to go anyway. When you go there with that mindset, you're going to probably have a miserable time, and the experience is going to live up to all those expectations you set for it. Instead, if you change your mindset before going and you say, yeah, this isn't my first choice of how to spend my evening, but it's not going to be so bad, and at least it'll have this, it'll have that, it'll let me give me a chance to do this, to do that. I can support my family member, I can support my friend, I can be a good coworker, whatever it may be. If you try to reframe the event in your mind, then it's not going to make it the best night of your life. And it may not change too much, but it is giving you the opportunity to make something more of it, right? So your expectations will somehow mediate your experience. And so that's what I'm talking about, is how to mediate your experience of reading, right? And how you think about reading. And this is because I think the mind is incredibly powerful, right? I think the mind is infinitely powerful. So if you can reframe the way you go about reading, I think that can improve your experience of reading and also improve your experience when you're not reading as well. And that is the goal. So what do I have against the idea of escapism, right? When you say that I read for escapism, it conjures up for me this idea that I'm taking all of the difficulties of the world. And now, first off, I should say I'm sympathetic to that idea because it is a hard time to be alive right now. It feels like the world is on fire and there's nothing but problems. And that is on a meta level. Like, everywhere is hard to live. Never mind individual problems you may be experiencing in your life, whatever hardships you may have. But on a societal level, on a global level, it's just a hard time to be alive. It's a stressful time to be alive. I can sympathize with that. I agree with that. So when you talk about escapism, what it conjures up for me is the idea that all of these problems I'm having, all of my hardship, I am going to escape from it, right? I'm going to put it down, and then I'm going to somehow flee from it. and I'm going to be free of it by reading this book, or by drinking this alcohol, or by popping this pill, by engaging in this gambling app, right? I'm going to be free from this hardship. And the difficulty is you can't escape your hardships by ignoring them, right? You can put them to the side and ignore them for a while, but they're still there when you're done reading, when you're done watching Netflix, when you're done doing whatever it is you're doing. And you haven't developed any way to deal with them in a healthier way. You just put them to the side, pretended they weren't real, but they didn't go anywhere. You didn't actually escape them. All you did is try to forget about them for a short period of time. And that may have been helpful for that 1 hour of your life, or however long it may be, but it isn't helping you in the big picture, right? It's only giving you this 1 hour of respite. And the problems are the exact same as they were before. And the difficulty, or the danger, right? And again, this is a scale of danger. And the danger that comes with reading in this way is very minimal in this big picture. But what danger there is that you're not going to develop the techniques to deal with those problems. And instead, you're only going to focus on that time when you can put them aside, when you can ignore them, when you can pretend they're not real. So since you're not developing any of the techniques or means to actually address your emotional relationship with your hardship, right? Because the hardship, often is outside of your control. But you can, even if you can't control the hardship, you can control the way you relate to it and the way you navigate it. But if you aren't developing those techniques and all you're doing is hoping they'll go away, hoping that you can escape into something and it won't be there when you come back, then your life is going to be focused on that escape only. And it's not going to be giving the attention it needs to actually do the work to lead a more balanced and peaceful life that can navigate whatever hardships you're experiencing in a more copacetic way, right? And I think that mindset of escaping into literature or into any of your hobbies is bringing with it that baggage. This idea that, if you're a prisoner and you get out to go to the yard for an hour for exercise, you're not escaping prison, right? Escaping prison is when you get to go over the fence and not look back, and you don't ever have to be worried about being imprisoned again. So if every time you go to the yard for an hour, you think I'm escaping, but then you have to go back to your cell, what's going to happen when you go back to your cell? You're going to feel even worse. Like your experience of imprisonment is going to be even worse because you allowed yourself this mindset of being, I've escaped. But really all I did was walk around in the activity yard for an hour, right? So by creating this false vision of escaping and then not actually doing the work to get rid of the hardship, when you return to the hardship, the emotional labor and the emotional difficulties of whatever that hardship may be, whatever hardships real life are giving us right now, are going to be even heavier and even harder to navigate because you have convinced yourself that you've escaped and then only to be proven wrong, right? So there's a difference between going to the exercise yard and actually escaping prison. And if you confuse them, then you're setting yourself up for more failure in the future. And that is what I think happens on a subconscious level. I don't mean an explicit level, but on a subconscious or an implicit level, when you say, I am reading for escapism, what you're doing is you have this idea that when I am engaging in whatever this hobby may be, in this case, reading, then my problems, I can forget about them, and maybe they won't be as bad when I am done, right? And it doesn't work that way. That's not how problems get solved, right? So what I am recommending and what I find helpful in my life is to not use the framework, the mental framework of escaping. I think the idea of escaping isn't useful. Instead, the framework that I find useful or constructive is the framework of going on a retreat, of retreating into your hobbies. And so when I talk about retreat, I mean retreat in the spiritual sense, not in the sense of a military retreat. But that might work as well. I'll think about that a little later in the video. But if you think of a spiritual retreat, when people go on retreat, they do retreat for what? You can do a 1-day retreat, a 3-day retreat, a 10-day retreat. In the Tibetan tradition, it's very common to do a 3-year, 3-month, 3-day retreat. But even just a single meditation session can be considered a retreat. So what happens when you're going on a retreat is whatever your worldly problems are, you put them to the side because you're focusing on your mind right now, right? You're focusing on whatever this spiritual practice is that you're doing. And so whatever your worldly concerns are, whatever your concerns are about your own life and your own experience, as well as the world around you, you put them to the side so you can engage in this spiritual work, whatever it may be, right? In our tradition, when you're trying to develop single-pointed concentration, the first 2 pieces of advice they give you are 1, abandon your homeland, and 2, find an isolated place. And the reason you do that is because your homeland is the place that is filled with all of the people that trigger experiences of desire and of hatred, right? They're all your old bad habits. And so you want to create the most conducive conditions possible in order to develop your mind. And those are obstacles to that. So when you do retreat, you want to create as conducive conditions as possible. And so you do put all of your worries, all of your difficulties, all of your hardships to the side. But the difference is between that and escapism. When you're going on retreat, what you're doing is not trying to pretend your hardships don't exist or that they won't be there when you're done with retreat. When you're going on retreat, what you're doing is developing the skills and the means to face your hardships, right? You're recognizing that by engaging in this work, whatever it may be, I am developing the tools, the techniques, the wisdom, the reserve, the emotional capacity to then go back to the real world to deal with whatever hardships I have, inner hardships or external negative conditions, and to face them with a clearer mind, right? With a better set of emotional reserves, with a better strategy. So you're not trying to escape the difficulties of the real world. You are giving yourself an opportunity to develop the strength and the skill and the calm that will allow you to face them head on and not be afraid of them anymore. So you're going on retreat in order to not avoid the real world, but to prepare yourself to live in the real world more fully and in a more balanced way when you don't have the opportunity for retreat. And I think our reading life can do the same thing. If you go into a book with the mindset that I am reading this book, whatever it may be, it doesn't matter how fluff or how grimdark it may be, or anywhere on the spectrum, I'm going to put whatever worldly concerns I have for the moment, whatever the stress I have in my life about the world, whatever it may be, I can put that to the side for an hour and I can read. What I'm doing by engaging in this isn't simply escaping, pretending that my problems aren't real. What I'm doing is I'm giving myself the opportunity to settle my mind. I'm giving myself the opportunity to learn new perspectives of how I could exist in the world. I'm giving myself the opportunity to recharge myself, right? To have a small amount of self-care where I'm taking this time for myself. I'm taking this time to understand myself and to allow myself some small amount of pleasure that I may not be able to experience in my everyday life due to everything else going on. And it's a very small worldly pleasure, the chance to, sit down and read for an hour or for a half hour or whatever amount of time our privilege affords us. But it is a type of worldly pleasure we can enjoy. So I'm not escaping from my worldly problems. What I'm doing is I'm giving myself the opportunity to learn more about my mind, to recharge my batteries, to develop a stronger set of emotional stability. So then when I have to go back to the real world and I have to face all of the problems, all of the hardships, all of the difficulties, I will be in a stronger position to do so. So I'm not trying to escape my problems. I am retreating so I can develop strength to then face them head on, right? That is what the hobby of reading can give us. And I don't think that takes away from the pleasure of reading at all. I think that makes reading more robust. I think that makes reading more enjoyable because what it is doing is giving our reading a place in our whole life. It isn't something that we, run away to when we need to escape the real world. What it is doing is it's something that becomes integral to us understanding how we live our best lives, how we can regroup, how we can develop new strategies for engaging in the world, right? How we can understand ourselves in such a way that I can then return to my hardship and not be overwhelmed by it. In this way, I think that if you were to take this idea of retreat in a military sense, I think it works there as well. Instead of a spiritual retreat, military retreat, a military retreat isn't the same thing as surrender. Why do you retreat? You retreat because you want to recover your troops, you want to reorganize yourself, you want to develop a new strategy, and you want to develop the strength and the wherewithal and the energy to go back to the battle the next day. And in the same way, when you're engaging in whatever your hobbies may be, in this case, we're talking about reading, but I think this goes for any of your hobbies that you do to kind of shake off the shackles of your everyday life and the weariness and the humdrums of all of the world that is overbearing, right, in our lives. Whatever those may be, you're going into them in such a way to reorganize yourself, to find yourself again, and to stabilize yourself, to recharge yourself, right, to re-energize yourself. And I think in that way, this idea of reading as retreat, reading as recharging, it's a much more powerful way to frame the practice of reading instead of reading for escapism. And so this is where I can see you saying this is just pedantry, that the idea, when I say I read for escape, maybe what I really mean is what you're saying. That's possible. But the way we think about things, the labels we give things, the ideas that we associate with practice, they affect our experience of that practice, right? And I believe that firmly. The way you label something matters. The way you identify something matters, okay? And it may not be the most important thing in the world. And it may not make a monumental change in your experience, but it does matter, right? And so if you can reframe the way you think about the practice of reading, and that it isn't somewhere you go to escape your worries, but it is a place you go to recharge yourself so you can face your worries with a better sense of strength and calm, then the reading experience becomes so much more beneficial to your life outside of reading. as opposed to only benefiting you in those small periods of time when you actually are reading a book or talking about a book. So I think labeling things in a way matters. I think the way we understand the world around us matters. And I think that the mental frameworks within which we engage in our everyday life matter. And I think that if we want to make our experiences as robust and beneficial as possible, then we should strive for mental frameworks that are leading towards that goal. And the idea of escaping from our problems just by ignoring them isn't going to lead us towards that sense of liberation, whatever it may be. All it's going to do is create this false sense of security that is not going to really help us when the pedal hits the metal, right? It's only going to abandon us. So instead of looking for escape, I think we need to look for retreat. I think we need to look for something more because we owe it to ourselves to let our experience of reading be more than just the pages in a book, but to be something that affects our whole life in a meaningful and positive way. So that is my random thought about escapism and why I don't think framing a reading habit as being an escapist practice is a useful way to frame it. What do you think? Maybe I am just being pedantic. Maybe I am totally out there. I'd love to hear your thoughts about it down in the comments. I'd also love to hear, why do you read? Do you think reading does give you a chance to recharge your emotional battery? Does it give you a chance to explore the world or engage in the world in a more robust and meaningful way? Or is it just something you do to pass the time? Any and all thoughts, please share them down in the comments. I'd love to have a respectful discussion down there. But for now, I'll say thank you for spending some time with me. I appreciate you. Please be kind to yourselves, take care of each other, and go slowly.